They come up, they lose their job or whatever, they have to resell the property. Or they've moved on, or their relationship is broken up, so there's not the two of them anymore, they want to get rid of the property. What do you do in those situations? What are your obligations? Well, if you're going to list that property, first of all, if they don't live in it, the property has to be registered with Tarion. Most agents aren't aware of that. You have to register the property with Tarion. You become the builder for all intents and purposes. Now there's a streamlined process. There's the $350 fee. You can do that fairly quickly. You're registered, and then you have to attach to the agreement of purchase and a sale a schedule that Tarion will provide you, which has to go into the agreement, and that has to tell the status of the warranty, whether there's outstanding work, etc., the status of the property, etc., and it has to make it clear to the buyer that the warranty is not running from when they buy the property. The warranty is running from when the other person closed on the transaction. So these are things that you have to be aware of. The other thing in that situation is you've got to make your sellers aware of is, and the reason why you have to do that is because you're the professional. You're supposed to know this. I'm not going to know this. So if Tarion comes after them, they're going to just turn around and blame you, and of course they're going to look to you for your damages because you're the professional. So once again, to keep you out of trouble, make sure that you're following those rules. And if you're acting for a buyer, it's the same thing. If you're acting for a buyer and you know the property hasn't been lived in, it's a flip, then you want to make sure that that seller is getting registered and you've got the schedule in the agreement of purchase and sale to prove that, once again, you know your responsibilities and you're professional. So those are the things. Now, what are the other problems with when you're flipping these properties? Well, what sellers never realize is that they don't qualify for the GST rebate anymore. So they're going to get stuck with the GST rebate coming back. So if they're going to sell it, this has to be brought up front to them. Well, you're going to pay $7,000 or $8,000 in GST rebate here. The other thing they don't realize is if they don't occupy it, they don't qualify for the first-time home buyer's rebate of $2,000 for land transfer tax. So all of a sudden they're selling something and they've got $8,000 in GST and $2,000 which they haven't paid for the land transfer tax, which is all going to come back and hit them. So these are things that you have to make them aware of so they don't come back on you later on and blame you and look to you to pay their land transfer tax, etc. And that goes for every property. This is not just on new homes. We have students now buying student accommodation, actually. We had one a couple of weeks ago. Well, you would think if they're buying it, you think, well, gee, that's pretty smart. You think they'd live in it. But what they do, they've already got good accommodation, so they're not intending to live in these rental properties that they're buying. They're buying them to rent out. But they're expecting to get the first-time home buyers rebate of land transfer tax, which they don't qualify for. So, if you run into that situation, you have to make people aware of this as well, that if they're not going to occupy it, they're going to get stuck with this. So those are some of the things that you really want to be sort of focused in on and aware of, because we constantly see these, and in these difficult times, we see more and more people flipping these properties and not understanding the consequences of flipping it. And then, of course, the first-time home buyer, everybody thinks they're a first-time home buyer, wants to be a first-time home buyer because they want that $2,000. But the occupancy is the key there. And, of course, they can't have owned a home anywhere in the world. That's the other thing. And, they get confused in that area. They get confused in that area because, CMHC, they have different rules. Well, you qualify if, it's 7 years, etc. So they get all these mixed messages from people saying, oh, well, you're a first-time home buyer for CMHC. Why aren't I a first-time home buyer for this program? And, they're not. And it's amazing how the government comes back. The problem is that when the government comes back, they come back on me because they just debit my account for the land transfer tax. So, it's very important on our part to make sure that we make this clear and we're paying the taxes, because now that everything's done electronically, if there's something owing, boom, just comes out of my account. That's the wonderful thing about the government. They can, just do about anything. So we have to be very careful to make sure we get that message out, and you want to be aware of that too. Now there's a couple of questions back here.
Yeah, how long do they have to live in the house? If it's a new home, is there
Well, it's like 6 months usually.
6 months.
The problem is we have people, we have some agents, they bought the third Mattamy home. Well, how many are you living in?
Yeah.
We've had to say, well, we can't act for you anymore on this. You're going to have, because, we know this is a rental. You can't be living in all these homes. So So that's a problem, but usually it's 6 months. But a lot of people say, well, I'll move a bed in, you know, we have this, so they move a bed in, and, you know, they spend a night there, and they figure they're living in it. But what they don't do is they don't change their driver's licenses, they don't change any of their ID. So, you know, that doesn't go very far when the government checks, and it's amazing how the government checks. We have them coming back a year and a half later on some of these things. And, you know, and of course it's the same with the builders. They just go into the builder's account and say, oh, geez, we gave you that rebate, but, you know, those people didn't qualify. The money comes back out of the builder's account, and then the builder's turning around and chasing down the seller or the purchaser from the builder. So these are all things that you've got to be aware of. You know, the other thing we're running into, in fact, I was at a seminar this morning, actually, fortunately we had webcast, so I don't have to go to Toronto, but we're talking about condominiums. And